Did you know that there's a coaching adjustment on the defensive side of the ball that many players online are ignoring? And believe it or not, there is a use for this so long as you understand what each of these does. We're not talking about the depth and width for the safeties. We're talking about the midpoint. You guys can use these adjustments to play field relative or offensive formation relative so you get better coverage results out of your play calls. Now, why is this important? Well, coverage is tough in this year's game. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, notification bell, grab out your pen and pad. Let's get after it. Now, there's no denying defense, at least in early October, is really hard in Madden 26. Between the drop picks and so many of the aggressive catches out there, it is a real challenge. And that's for the players that are playing pretty solid coverage to begin with. But then there are players out there that can't even get their guys to guard correctly or just feel like there are constantly open areas of the field. And I would suggest for those players that we start to utilize the safety depths, widths, and midpoints. Now, from an online perspective, pretty much every Madden Pro or knowledgeable player that you will face online is going to set their depths for their safety to close. This is going to make sure that they align 8 yards off the line of scrimmage, which is huge when you're talking about people that like to hike throw those pesky seam routes in the game. A lot of players will also go to their width and they will set their safeties to pinch. This is going to make it so rather than playing closer to the numbers outside, they're going to pinch in towards the hash marks. For the purpose of this video today, I'm going to actually leave this set to default, and we are only going to set close and midpoint because we're technically going to be messing with the width of our safeties via the midpoint assignment. And that's something that a lot of players don't understand. So let's go ahead and explain what these do. Now, the first two that we're going to talk about is hash directional. These are left and right hash assignments. These will align your safeties based on your play call, irrespective of which side of the field is the wide side or the short side, and irrespective of what the offensive formation is in from a passing strength. If you don't know what that means, we'll get into that momentarily. The next two adjustments that we'll talk about are strong and weak. Those are the passing strength settings, meaning that your safeties will align to the passing strength, the side with more receivers, or opposite of that passing strength, which is the side with less receiving options. And then we have two that are more so grass related. These are going to be the amount of turf on the field, and your safeties will rotate based off of that in your play call. These are going to be your field, or the side with more grass, and boundary, the side with less grass. All 6 of these can be used from game to game based off of your opponent's tendencies. So let's start off with just a generic look here. We're going to play close in default shell. So with this, I'll call maybe a cover 2 defense. Now, when we're on close setting, you can see first and foremost, we got our safeties aligned 8 yards off the line of scrimmage. You see that our safety on the left here is basically aligned near the numbers. Our safety on the right here is aligned near the numbers. This is a very, very close alignment, and they're very, very wide. This is how cover 2 will look against an empty formation. If I were to call maybe a cover 4, again, taking a look, we just have depth, and we have our midpoint set to default. This is going to give us a somewhat similar look, but maybe a little bit more pinch. So when we come out in that same formation, you see here that our safety on the left is a little bit closer. Our safety on the right is still pretty wide out there. We don't really like that. So what we want to do is make some modifications. This is where a lot of players would say, let's go ahead and set our safety width to pinch. Okay, so when we do that and we call either of those two shells, you will see that this will align them close and narrow, basically pinched. So that way they're aligned a little bit closer. When you think about all the compression formations in this game, it's great to have these guys in a spot where they can defend those hike throw seams right down the middle where your user isn't, because usually you're underneath. So again, you get a lot of help from these safety alignments of being on close and pinch. But a lot of players still aren't taking advantage of those midpoints. So let's go ahead now, and rather than going with our width being set, now let's start to get into something kind of meta, which is going to be a little bit more of your tight formation or your bunch formation compression. This is where you're going to really notice how useful this is. So in this particular situation, the ball is completely set in the middle. I haven't moved it. It's equidistant from the hash marks, meaning that there really isn't a field and a boundary yet, but there's still is a strong and a weak alignment because this is dictated by the offensive formation's passing strength. So when we have a passing strength, we are talking about the way that the offense is going to be flipped towards based off of numbering. Now, this is what we would call a 2x2 formation. In this example, we have a receiver here and a receiver here. On this side, we have a receiver here and a tight end here and the running back here. I'm starting off with a little bit more of a confusing one because this is going to kind of allow you guys to understand why I prefer field and boundary over strong and weak? Because this is one of those examples where the game considers the passing strength to be the side with more receivers. In other words, if you have twins with 2 receivers to the left and you have a receiver tight end and running back to the right, a lot of us would view that as, oh, well, the passing strength's to the right. It's got more guys that can catch the football. And I tend to agree with that analysis, but Madden really doesn't. Basically, they view it as the more skillful receivers are to the left, the less skillful ball eligible players are to the right. In terms of pure route running, catching the ball, running after the catch. So the passing strength is more so geared towards the number of receivers that are on each side of the field. If I were to give you another example, let's take a look at this jumbo formation, for instance. In this example, we have a receiver and a tight end to the left. We have 2 tight ends to the right. So the passing strength of this is going to rotate towards the receiver. A lot of times when people think of passing strength or auto flipping on being flipped towards the passing strength, if I were to go into my actual coach settings menu, you'll find that even if I set all of this to default, and I set my auto flip on, you're going to notice that my nickel corner is going to align to the side with the receiver rather than to the side with, technically the extra body, the tight end. So this is kind of how the game views passing strengths. A lot of times auto flip on is just going to flip your nickel corner to the passing strength. This is why sometimes you feel like your formations are wrong. And this is why we're going to talk about midpoints. So when we talk about midpoints, we're talking strong and weak. This is dictated by the offensive formation. Your opponent can still kind of mess this up and maybe not even know that they're doing this. But what they can't manipulate with is field and boundary. This is based off of grass. And I would say 90% of players online have an offensive tell in their formations that they call. Most players tend to like to run their passing strength to the wide side of the field. So rather than dealing with, okay, well, their passing strength, I think, is the side with a wide receiver, a tight end, and a running back, and they're running it to the wide side of the field, and then I, for whatever reason, am deciding to use strong and it flips the wrong way. Well, let's go ahead and do field. So now we're going to go right back to that same formation here, this tight Y off. And I want you to watch here in this example, when I call this coverage, when we're in between the hash marks, notice how our safeties are aligned like so. There is no real field and boundary. It's equidistant. The ball is smack dab in the middle of the field. But now when I start to say, let's put the ball on the right hash mark, you're going to start to see this change a lot. Your safeties are going to rotate to the field. Now, this will also greatly vary based off of what coverage you're in. You see right here, I am in a quarters defense. So it's playing based off of a quarters alignment. You see that my safety is greatly exaggerated to the field or the wide side of the field. If I were to move this ball to the other hash mark, now making the field the right side of the field, you will now see that same rotation, even though our nickel corner is still aligned to the passing strength. So you've got the nickel corner aligned to the passing strength, but now our safeties are rotated away from the passing strength because we're aligning them to the field. This is going to, again, differ from shell to shell. So if I were to be, for instance, in a defense such as let's go with maybe a cover 3 here, and I run this particular look, you're going to now see that, again, we're going to have our nickel corner aligned to the passing strength, the side with 2 pure receivers, as opposed to the side with 1 receiver, 1 tight end. But our safety in center field is now rotated to the field, the wide side of the field, and he's going to line up on that hash mark. If we were to put this ball back on the other hash, we're going to see that safety rotated to the other hash mark. So now he's aligned in that particular spot. Now, of course, you can also go in and start to mix in depth changes for your safeties. If you don't like him that far off the ball, of course, you can always change that. But this will also change the way that your safeties align and maybe like a cover 2. This is a 2 high defense. So let's say for whatever reason, I'm calling a Tampa 2. Safeties to the field. You see right here, this is what this looks like. If I want to call Tampa 2 on this particular call with safeties to the field, you're going to see them rotate again. Let's get into an example where we're having the safeties rotate to the boundary. This is the opposite of the field. Again, field, wide side, boundary, short side. And we were to call a defense like quarters. So again, we are going to have our nickel corner on auto flip aligned to the side with the 2 pure receivers rather than the 1 tight end, 1 receiver side. But now we've got our safeties rotated to the boundary, the short side of the field. So you see our safety on the left cheats just a little bit more towards the numbers, and our safety on the right cheats a little bit more towards the hash. If I were to put this ball on this hash, you're going to see the inverse of that. You're going to see the safety on the right is cheating a little bit towards the numbers, and the safety on the left is cheating a little bit more towards the hash. If I were to be playing this as a slightly different look here, like let's go left, you're going to see a difference in the way that this rotates against the same look. So now you see that this guy's cheating all the way darn near towards the center field, and this guy's cheated all the way out here. Now, again, this is going to have strengths and weaknesses for so many different coverages, but these pre-snap looks can greatly change the way that you play your coverage, especially when you start to mix in your depth changes with this. Imagine coming to the line of scrimmage with your offensive formation set to, let's say we're playing a bunch formation player, a player that always aligns his bunch to the wide side of the field, and maybe they're throwing a ton of flood combos. So if we are playing a player that is always coming out in their bunch to the wide side of the field as soon as they break the huddle, and they're stressing the seams and the sidelines to the wide side of the field, you would say close in field. Now, when you call this coverage, you're going to start to see your safeties cheated towards the, not only playing closer, but also towards the field. Now, of course, you could also press your corners as well. This will give you a look that kind of looks like this. Now, why is this important? Keep in mind too, that when you press, sometimes it resets your safety location. So you might want to like click onto them, but this is important because when you're playing like a matching principle, you can get that safety cheating out towards that route. And you see how it better handles that crisscross on a flooding combo. This could also be big for just in general setting up maybe some Mabel calls. Maybe you don't even want to run a stock coverage, but you really would like to have maybe like a zone dropped blue and then a zone drop purple, and then maybe you play like a deep zone over the top. So you're creating a unique Mabel call on one side of the call. Again, there are so many different things that you can do with this that I think a lot of players are overlooking. Now, the reason that I say this is that this is some introductory content to some future content I'm going to be posting on my strategy website, gridirongameplans.gg. Right now, Colt 45 and I are in the midst of labbing up what I think is going to be a revolutionary meta shifting set for your shell, your midpoint, your depth, and your width. So make sure that you guys are on the lookout. My link is in the description. Go check it out. Make sure you hop in our Discord and say hello. Otherwise, I'm going to get up out of here. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday afternoon. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, this is Zayn. Get the labbing. Good luck.